Mana?
Mana aku bukan?
Tadi Ania kata tak? Ini tak boleh cakap lagi, dia play kan? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our very first program of Baseerah Talk Series. Can I check if I can be heard clearly? All right, just a quick reminder, a gentle reminder for housekeeping. To avoid interruptions, please keep your microphone muted throughout the session. And if you have any questions for today's guest, kindly drop your questions at the chat box. All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Greetings to Associate Professor Dr. Badri Najib Zubir, Dean of IIUM Academy, Mr. Wan Abdul Rahim Kamil, our honorable guest speaker, ladies and gentlemen, our respected audience, brothers and sisters. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all. Welcome to our very first session of Baseerah Talk Series, a new program organized by IIUM Academy of Graduate and Professional Studies, or more known as IIUM Academy. My name is Emma from IIUM Academy Events. It's a very great honor and pleasure to meet all participants in this Zoom meeting, and we are also streaming live on YouTube. So welcome to all viewers on our IIUM Academy YouTube channel. This is the first session conducted, so we are going to have more after today, and inshallah we will try to our best to make Baseerah Talk Series a monthly talk. And in this program, we will dive deep into the minds of professionals and experts from the industry. Our invited guests are prominent speakers who will deliver topics related to their fields. So by joining this program, you will be exposed to the experience and knowledge of industrial key players. So stick with us, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, as we are going to make announcement on our social media platforms for the upcoming Baseerah Talk Series. As for our first talk today, we are very delighted and honored to present you Mr. Wan Abdul Rahim Kamil, Group Shariah Advisory Committee Member for PNB Berhad, who is also the expert to speak on Islamic capital market and in particular, the Sukuk. He will be covering in this talk the history, concept, structure, and various applications of Sukuk in light of contemporary needs. To introduce him, I have the pleasure to invite IIUM Academy Dean, Associate Professor Dr. Badri Najib Zubir. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. And good morning to all. It gives me great pleasure to be with all of you today to introduce to you the speaker for our first in the Baseerah, first session in the Baseerah Talk Series. So we have with us Encik Wan Abdul Rahim Kamil. Many of you might think that Kamil is his father's name, but it is not. That is part of his name. Wan Abdul Rahim Kamil bin Wan Muhammad Ali. So that's his full name. And he has been actively involved in Islamic banking and finance. He has almost 40 years of experience in Islamic financial services industry in Malaysia. He started off his career in Islamic finance at Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad and Bank Islam subsidiaries from 1983 to 1994. And from then onward, he served as the managing director of Abrar Discounts Berhad, which was a licensed financial institution involved in investment banking activities and interbank Islamic financial market. And from 2007, he has been engaged in many advisory and capacity building programs for investors and capital market intermediaries through the Securities Commission in Malaysia and the Securities Industries Development Corporation, SIDC. And due to his excellent and meritorious service to the Islamic financial services, he has been awarded with a few accomplishments or awards throughout his involvement, throughout his years of involvement. I can mention over here 4 of them. One, Outstanding Leadership in Islamic Finance, which was awarded at the 5th London Sukuk Summit 2011. Number 2, Outstanding Export Achievement Award for the most outstanding achievement in Islamic banking and financial services in emerging markets. Malaysian External Trade Development Corporation, or MATRADE, 2015, which is a group award of which he was a key member. And then number 3, Islamic Finance Pioneer Award for Capital Market. And this was awarded for Islamic Finance Stalwarts, Islamic Banking and Finance Institute Malaysia, IPFIM, and this was in 2017. And finally, most outstanding individual contribution to Islamic finance, which was awarded at the Kuala Lumpur Islamic Finance Forum, KLIFF, in 2017. So we have with us today a prominent speaker who has been involved tremendously in the Islamic finances industry. So let us now hear from him. And over to you, Mr. Wan Rahim Kamil. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning to all. Thank you for joining in this session. I'm quite surprised that among the list of attendees, I saw a lot of seniors, in fact. The first name I saw is Ahmad Nazir Cik Yen, who is a very senior and good friend of mine, and there are quite a number of other attendees as well. My intention actually is in my last days of life, perhaps, I want to pass down the knowledge that I have acquired over the past many years, particularly in Sukuk, because that was where I started what I call that the approach to Islamic capital market back in back in the days of my bank, Islam days, I will tell it on. Now this series is going to be quite basic for many if you are seniors in the industry. But my intention is to make sure that you go to the processes and understand the nitty-gritty and intricacies of Sukuk structuring. Because in my days as what I call that, being interviewed by quite a number of students, particularly the PhD students, and I realized that they missed a lot of points in discussing the concept and structure of Sukuk. And I feel it is my duty that to make this what I call it, the basics known and in a simplified manner to all of you. I hope that this series, the Baseerah series, will continue further because quite lately in my career, before I left the Securities Commission, I did a series of about 15 case studies in Sukuk that would explain the approaches to Sukuk in a different way from what we have seen available in the market. And I hope that I have the time and what I call it, the health to share all this with you, inshallah. Now let me just go through the first, what I call that. The title is Understanding Sukuk, the basics, the structures the practitioners should know. The first, what I call it, maybe the series for today is going to be very basic for many of you, so please bear with me. But these are the basics that has not been told in the textbooks or not been told in the lectures or discussions, which I think I would like to you all to know and to be able to understand why it happened and why it has been done that way. It wouldn't be fair for me not to go through the statistics of Sukuk. This is the achievement in 2021, just published basically by one of the magazines. You can see that in spite of the pandemic in 2021 and 2020, there is quite a growth of Sukuk in the overall market of 40 billion, though not that what I call it commendable compared to the past. But what is interesting is that of this 20 billion, of this 40 billion, there is 2% being issued or raised for the need of the ESG agenda. Now, this is something that I want all of you to understand as well, that today Islamic finance has gone into the new foray or the new, what they call it, agenda of growth under the sustainability agenda, SDG, of the UN, which is going to last another, what they call it, less than 10 years from now. But then there's been quite a number of initiatives taken, particularly in the social impact agenda. And this is something which is very relevant to us, because in the Maqasid al-Sharia, you can see that the dimensions of Maqasid that include quite a number of social impact agenda as well. And this is something which is not much understood within the fraternity of Islamic finance, as to how the Maqasid is relevant to the drive and to the agenda of today. This is the whole picture from 2017 to 2021. You can see that the amount is small, about 5 billion, but the growth is quite substantial in sustainability. There is not any recorded of sustainability sukuk for 2021. There is quite a number of green sukuk. And green sukuk is something that I hope I can share with you one day, inshallah, because the structure of green sukuk needs a new dimension of discipline and requirement within it, and how, what they call it, the stakeholders' participation and responsibility and accountability is greatly enhanced within the structure. Let me go to the basic first. This is the normal question of what is sukuk, why is it different from conventional bonds, the criticism of sukuk particularly, which never end. You know, if you're in the Islamic finance industry, the criticism of Islamic finance is never ending. The perceptions are quite a number. Most surprisingly, the critics and the negative perception does not come from the general market, but come from those space of people who are doing Islamic economics and finance or business. This is something quite interesting. When I was in Russia about 5 years ago, promoting the Islamic banking business there, the critics were not from the non-Muslims. It was very well received by the Catholics, sorry, by the Orthodox Christians in Russia, but the greater critics came from Muslims there. And when the test was done in one of the banking window, it was very true. The majority of the clients of the bank was in fact the non-Muslim. Then the Muslims were not receptive to it at all. And of course, the continuous negative perception of sukuk and Islamic finance. I just read a report 2 days ago from some prominent professors on this, and it's quite interesting on how I can see the misunderstanding of the happenings or the governance system within the Islamic finance space is so apparent. And then sukuk and scams arise because of the issue that we have, the one MDB, particularly now people ask many questions on how can you scam through a sukuk. And of course, we have got the other further development of sukuk, which is quite apparent now. The World Bank particularly has got various agenda on sustainability and social impact. Negara and the banking industry has got a value-based intervention. The SE has got the sustainability and social impact agenda under the CMP, the recently launched Capital Market Master Plan. I would like to advise all of you who are involved in the space of Islamic finance to read the financial report by Negara and the Capital Market Master Plan by the SC very thoroughly, because it gives a very illustrative and very comprehensive picture of what are the agenda and the growth areas within the space of Islamic finance and capital market. Now, the first, in the history of sukuk, the first breakthrough was in 1990. I was in Bank Islam at that time. It was raised by Shell Malaysia, Shell MDS, particularly a subsidiary of Shell Malaysia, for a project in Bintulu, Sarawak, related to the distillation of gas into oil and other byproducts. This was also a prototype, industry or technology. And so they approached Bank Islam and challenged Bank Islam whether we can come up with an innovative structure of sukuk. Alhamdulillah, we managed to do it under the concept of Shahada Ad-Dain. But the challenges were many, because the challenge particularly came from the need to to bring understanding to a multinational shell group and its what do you call it and what do you call it, its other structures within it, the legal department, the taxation and accounting, to make the understanding concept and system. I must share with you that in discussing the legal documentation, we nearly went into fight. Actually, there was a lot of argument by the Japanese counterparts, by the British counterparts, in trying to what do you call it, to push through the concept of profit against interest, profit of the concept of what do you call it, sale of asset with a promise to buy back. That was by INA at that time. And this was done under the concept of buy Vietnam Agile, which is not much used now, or not used at all now, under two tranches. Now, tranche one of 75 million looks small today, but it was a very big in 1990. It was very big, 50 million for a second tranche. I put a picture of plain of vanilla ice cream there because this was much talked about as a plain vanilla concept, which I like to dispute for the reason that there arises a lot of difficulties in trying to formulate or trying to encapsulate this product. At the bank negara level, they couldn't decide as to what product this is or this was going to be. Finally, we managed to structure that under private debt securities, and then with a certain changes and certain assurance from Bank Negara Malaysia, which was regulating Sukuk at that time, it became an acceptable asset class among the financial investors in Malaysia. Now, to be an asset class is a class what call it, is a pride of its own, because then the accounting concept would then be would cater for it properly, as well as the what do you call that, the concept of profit recognition against interest and so many other things. What is very surprising is that a lot of the conventional investors came in to participate. This first product was the first securitization of Sharia combined asset in the world. You can see the word securitization there and think that it's a simple topic. You know, recently a PhD student came to see me and challenged that Islamic finance cannot grow because of securitization. And I asked him back, I said, do you understand what it is? And I will explain to you, I will answer your question when you come back to me and tell me that you have understood the word securitization. And he never come back. But securitization is a concept of actually evidencing any contract of finance. In this case, the Islamic contract of finance, with securities or with papers that are valuable, that has got value. This is the first time that is ever done. And I can remember that back in 1991, a group of what called it capital market experts came down from the UK to interview me on the basis of securitization of Islamic assets. And they were very surprised that Islamic finance actually is very dynamic. And the Shahada Dime, the product that was created a new financial security as an investment product within the country. It was the pride of the nation. It was what you call the talk about in what you call it in a very active way. What you call it outside Malaysia, in fact. To tell you the story of how this was created, I remember that when we came up with the idea of doing securitization for Islamic asset, I was not sure whether this is Sharia based or Sharia compliant. So I called my lecturer, my mentor, Dr. Abdul Aziz Ahmad Najjar. If you are a student of Islamic finance, this name would be very familiar to you, Dr. Najjar. He was one of the pioneers of Islamic finance. He started the Mil'am Bank in Egypt back in the early days, experimenting on whether Islamic finance can be a tool of financing for the small industries or for small traders. And it was successful. So he came to Malaysia for a meeting, and I went to see him with Mustafa Hamad, another friend from Islam, and asked him whether we can do the likeness of bond for Islamic finance. And he couldn't answer. Frankly, he said, brother, he said, I cannot give you an answer to this, but let me go and research on this matter. And he came back about 2 weeks after that. In those days, we don't have internet, we don't have iPhone and so on, we don't have WhatsApp. He sent a letter to me. He sent a letter to me, explaining in great detail on the concept of how Islamic contract can be securitized and how it can be an asset class by itself. But what is most interesting under this Shahada time was the concept of Bai'at Muzayyadah or tendering system. Tendering was never known in Islamic space. And so when we sell the paper, when we issue the paper to the market based on a bid pricing system, tendering, there was something which the market then realized how the process of profit determination and price setting can be done under this concept of which later was told to me is by Muzayyadah or selling with increasing prices on a 10-day basis. The biggest challenge in this paper is the secondary trading of Bai'at Dain. This is a very became a very big debate discussed at the various international platforms to say that Bai'at Dain is haram. But actually, IOFI, the accounting body in Bahrain, came out with a dictate that Bai'at Dain is permissible if it is not Bai'at Kali bil Kali, not a debt for a debt. So Bai'at Dain, is permissible. But then there has been misunderstanding. There are a lot of critics on the floor in the various platforms to say outright that Bai'at Dain is haram, it shouldn't be done, Malaysia is the wrong thing. Until they explain to them that what we do is actually Bai'at Dain, under the concept of a discounting system, and it is not selling for another debt. Now these are the things that these are the achievements that we have done, we have created, and we have managed, and these are actually the tools that has been applied until today in the very structure of Sukuk that we have in the market. To show how the securitization happened under this concept is that we have got the process of, you can see under number 1 there, the financing and the Baik Bitham and Ajil between Ben Islam during that time, with Shell MDS as the originator or obligor. These are the terms that you must be familiar. Originator, obligor, and then the issue and so on. I will explain inshallah later on. There was a contract, existing contract, which they need to enter into. And then the process of securitizing the obligation under this contract through the creation of financial securities known as Shahadah Dain. We didn't call it Sukuk, we call it Shahadah Dain, which means the evidence of the debt. And this Shahadah Dain was then, placed out to the various subscribers or investors. Investors such as EPF was one of them, Tabung Haji was another, and many others. The obligation of the obligor to the investors is that there must be the servicing of the debt, the regular debt settlement. And when these debt settlement are made, they are paid then to the holders of the Shahadah Dain, to the Sukuk. This is basically how the securitization is been done. This is a concept which I think that will give a space to a lot of the students, particularly in the research or in the postgraduate studies, to understand and to discuss further on the aspect of securitization of Islamic assets. Of course, Sukuk is very popular today. In many spaces we read that when we say Kazakhstan is going, Islamic is going into Islamic finance, and they say they will issue Sukuk. The same thing goes for example, Nigeria or Guinea or wherever. They say that we're going to issue Sukuk. This is a signal that they're going to Islamic finance, which is not necessarily true. But then Sukuk is analogous to advancement in Islamic finance. That means when you advance yourself into the foray of Islamic finance, you're going through the sophisticated market, then you have got the credibility to issue Sukuk. That's why Sukuk becomes the benchmark of the advancement of any company or anybody into Islamic finance. The issue of Sukuk essentially issues to investor the securities or certificates and then use the proceeds to purchase the asset of managing the project. And then the issuer makes a contractual promise to buy back the Sukuk at a future date at par value. This is basically how the structure goes. There is the financing, there is the servicing of the financing extended. There is the promise to retire the debt that has been created. This is the definition of sukuk. There is some quite variation between what IOFI described as a sukuk and what is described in Malaysia as a sukuk. In Malaysia, we describe sukuk as include debt, whereas IOFI does not include debt as a sukuk. This is because of the reason that liquidity, what I call that, management, and security trading in other jurisdiction beyond Malaysia, they don't practice buy and dine or sale of debt or sale or secondary sale of the sukuk. Sukuk in the Middle East, in Dubai or Bahrain or in Saudi Arabia are issued, and it is never sold to the secondary market. They are hold for until maturity. Whereas in Malaysia, liquidity is very strong. People issue sukuk at 10 in the morning and they sell it in the secondary market at 12 noon, and it is sold again at 3 in the evening. It is very active, and this is how the market in Malaysia developed. The function is the various functions. The simple explanation of modern sukuk is that they are financial instruments that allow market players to obtain or mobilize cash or capital for investors. You can see here that the investors, the holders of the sukuk are the investors. Unlike the banking product, which are depositors, the bank takes fund from depositors and they manage it. In the case of sukuk, it is a direct. It is a what I call direct intimidation with the investors, between the issuer and the and the investors. It can be done via developing a structure based on underlying property or assets. This is the interesting part. In the early days, you need to have the asset and do a refinancing on the asset before you can raise a fund. But today, you can raise funding without even owning the asset through structures of tawarruk and so on, and wakala. So the bond process, normally the commercial bond involves lenders and borrowers, whereas the sukuk process involves the sukuk issuers and the investors or obligors via Islamic contract. This is the difference. Through various Islamic contract, which I will explain later, you bring in fund from the investors to the obligors or to the issuer for the purpose of them utilizing those funds into projects. So there are quite a number of of debate on this sukuk versus bonds, and then Islamic bond versus bond, and so on. The word of Islamic bond is not very popular in Malaysia. We use sukuk more popularly, but in the GCC they like to use Islamic bonds, and bonds. But you can see the confusion that has arisen when you use bonds, because bonds is likened to or always linked to borrowing and lending. And these are the normal debate that we have, and I very strangely that this is a normal question being asked by students during the even master's program on how Islamic bonds differ, how sukuk differs from bond, and I hope they can read this and understand the differences better. The appeal of investing in sukuk is due to many reasons. The volatility of sukuk has historically been lower. The global financial crisis, for example, did not hit sukuk market because of fixed rate concept. That's one of the reasons. It is something that can be essential in the current market condition, especially now in the what I call that, in the fiasco. They have risen from the Russian-Ukraine war. The market is going through quite a messy process. The foreign exchange, particularly, is very volatile, and we can see that there will be many changes in the interest rate offered under conventional borrowing and lending. It would affect sukuk, of course, because sukuk is also benchmarked to those rates. But because sukuk are structured on the basis of a fixed rate scenario, it will be less affected by this. And sukuk is structured to generate returns to investors from their undivided ownership of the sukuk's underlying asset. When you define sukuk, you must remember that sukuk are undivided shares in an asset. And this distinguishes the fact that a sukuk holder cannot go and claim any part of the asset finance because the share is undivided. They are all joint holders for the sukuk. And the structure is that we have not infringed any Islamic law or Sharia law in the structures. Of course, there are many debates on this. People are saying that the concept of what you're doing actually is backdoor riba. But let us leave that for further discussion. The liquidity feature is the most interesting. In Malaysia particularly, liquidity is one of the most significant features that is crucial for investors. No investor will buy into a sukuk that is not liquidity, that is not going to be liquid. That's why when they buy, they look at the rating of the sukuk. The list of a single A, for example, would attract them. Many of the investors look for investments that can be taken into cash without any time loss or financial expenses. This is very crucial. The market must be there, then the system within market must be what you call that, must be efficient. And this makes sukuk an ideal investment option since they are traded on the secondary market where they can be easily bought and sold at the current market price. This is what you call the unique feature. And I hope one day that I will bring a trader to talk to you on how trading mechanism is done on the market. Another advantage sukuk has over conventional bonds is that in general, they are based on real assets with tangible value. This is something that if there is any, what I call that, foreclosure on the asset, you can be rest assured that sukuk holders would have the recourse on asset. They are not just real, but would have tangible value. And they have the right to dispose of the asset without going through the lengthy court process because they are the owners of the asset through certain structures. And due to the unique structure and market dynamics, sukuk returns tend to be less correlated with other parts of the global fixed income market. There is the concept known as duration, and this is lesser under the product of sukuk. And these are the factors that made investors, attracted to Sharia structure. How can we, as the conventional players, be attracted to Sharia structure? Well, Sharia structure has been tested in many markets. If you look at the sukuk that has been issued by the various GLCs or sovereign, most of the investors or subscribers are in fact are the conventional investors, not so much from the Sharia compliant investors, but mainly are from the conventional investors from the UK, from EU, or from America, Hong Kong and Japan to some extent. And the return are very commensurate with the current market rate. Then, of course, the main issue on the security of the whole structure is there. The risks are well mitigated, the recourses are well defined, and of course, the liquidity aspect aspect I mentioned before, and the type of sector of the objective, which are pertinent to the limit, to the sectoral limit of many of the investors. So these are the things which are apparent to most of the sukuk structures that we have today. In understanding sukuk, we must know that they are structured in a way to generate return to investors. This is the basic objective. I will issue a sukuk and I will ensure that you get return. So in many ways, sukuk are very like to debt-based structures. And even if they are participatory in nature, they are still structured in such a way that it has got the similarity to debt-based instruments. And sukuk are issued and traded in compliance with the principle of Sharia. Unlike what critics would say, that the trading mechanism of sukuk is in line with Sharia, which prohibit riba or interest. And a sukuk can be structured or to offer a fixed return or floating rate, like the interest of a conventional bond. Although the floating rate mechanism is not well popular now because most of the issuers, they like the fixed return better. However, unlike a bondholder, a sukuk holder is granted an ownership interest in the asset or business being financed, and the return is tied to the performance of the underlying asset. This is different between bond and sukuk. That when you issue a bond or when you buy a bond, you don't have any interest, any ownership interest in the asset because you're just a lender to the transaction. In a sukuk, through the structure of a special purpose vehicle, the ownership of the asset goes to the investors. That means in any foreclosure process, the investor can immediately act on the asset and decide on what to do with it. Under a loan structure, in order to foreclose, you need to go through a court procedure, which might take about 2 to 3 years or 5 years or even 10 years. It's a long process, and it will cause a lot of losses to the investors. Under the definition of IOFI, which issues the accounting, auditing, governance, ethical, and Sharia standards based in Bahrain, it has laid down about 14 different types of sukuk that is very popular globally. In Malaysia, we have got about 15. But for discussion, I'll just bring you to the Malaysian sukuk market. In a sukuk, when investors buy sukuk and become sukuk holders, they receive a certificate physically or in electronic form. Today, it's all in electronic form from the issuer as evidence of ownership, and are entitled to receive periodic profit payments on the principal and amount invested. This is what they will get. They will get the what they call the evidence of ownership, either through the what they call digital numbers or maybe even physical to in some very rare cases. But it will promise you, the holder, that they would get periodic payment on the amount of principal they have invested. And upon maturity, the sukuk holder will get back the principal amount of investment. This is the obligation of the sukuk. As with most financial instruments, there are different methods of achieving the same objective. And the structure that I will discuss later is just one of the methods of doing it. These are the applied contract sukuk. The normally applied contract are under the uku al-mu'awwada or contract of exchange. Contract of sale are the murabaha or ijarah contract. These are the two very common contracts. I'm sure you know what is murabaha, you know what is ijarah. Under the uku al-ishtirak or the contract of participation, we have got musyarakah and mudarabah. Though these are less popular now, even though they are called musyarakah, they are not in the real essence musyarakah or mudarabah, for the reason that these are truly risk-sharing instruments. And risk-sharing is one space within the domain of risk that investors would like to avoid. So most of the structure that we have under the concept of al-wada was structured under al-wakala, but delve under the second level into murabaha or ijarah. And these are the normally applied structures to the sukuk, is wakala or salam or wa'an or istismar or tawar. I will assume that you all know what are the mechanism structure of this contract, which I won't go through. In Malaysia, the Sharia principle of sukuk are murabahah, markup sale, or baik bithaman ajil, different payment sale. I'm sure many of you do not know what is baik bithaman ajil today. It's not used anymore. Or baik inah, which is very much debated or disputed, which is today being replaced by tawarruk. Or baik istijra, supply sale, or baik salam, which is advance sale, baik wafa, sale and repurchase, which is normally embedded within the structure of sukuk for what I call that, facilitating recoveries. And there is ijarah. There are two types of ijarah that we know. One is ijarah, one is financial ijarah. This operating ijarah and financing ijarah. And financing ijarah is not accepted, what I call that, under IOFI. There is ijarah thummal bai, which is very much used under the principle of hire purchase in Malaysia. There is the istisna of purchase order, which is more for contract financing, mudarabah, profit sharing, musyarakah or profit or sharing. And of course, the qard al-hasan or benevolent loan, which is in my, what I call it, involvement in sukuk. There was only one sukuk which was structured in the qard al-hasan, which was given to Petronas Dagangan in the early days of it being listed. What I call it, I was involved in that. The issue of sukuk, what I call it, with transferable with warrants, transferable subscription rights, based on the underlying structure of qard al-hasan. But the uniqueness of that qard al-hasan was that the qard al-hasan was not given at the time of the sukuk issuance, but was a historical indebtedness given to Petronas Dagangan by Petronas without any contract. So what we did was we then went into structure or formalized the qard al-hasan into a contract, and then evidence it with the sukuk that was issued. Since there is no, what I call that, it is prohibited to take any return on any qard al-hasan contract unless it is voluntarily given by the borrower as hibah. So we structured the TSR, which was voluntarily given by Petronas Dagangan to Petronas as a token of gratitude for the extension of the Qadr Hasan over the many years. There is quite an interesting concept, and what do you call that? I would like to talk with you as a case study from Instagram, inshallah. So generally, sukuk are classified to three categories, which is the equity-based sukuk, formulated from the contract of murabahah and musharaka or ishtira. There is the debt-based sukuk, originated from the contract of Qadr Hasan, murabahah, salam, istisna, and ijara. And there is the hybrid sukuk, structured from the combination of the contract ijara, murabahah, and istisna. The reason why hybrid sukuk arises was because the Middle Eastern players or Middle Eastern issuers does not want to go into the difficulty of debating on the concept of buy and time or sale of debt. So in addition, there are supplementary Sharia principles applied to sukuk, such as buy muzayyada or open bidding trading. There is a buy and dine or debt trading. There's kafala or the guarantee, the hat tamalu or ownership right. There's the hibah or gift, the hiwala, remittance, ibra or the rebate, ittifaq dhimmi or the per agreed contract, the rahnu or collateral, ujrah or fee, and wakalah agency. And wakalah is in fact the most popular applied contract today. Now the link that I gave there is quite an interesting study, quite comprehensive to great extent for any scholars on Islamic finance. These are the categories of sukuk which I mentioned. Under the simpler structure of debt-based or participatory-based sukuk, sukuk were initially structured, as I said, under debt-based or participatory, depending on whether they were issued to finance additional investment, asset acquisition, or for other investments and requirements. The first category, which are debt-based in nature, replicates the risk of default as similar to bond. This is what I consider as importing the criteria and behavior of debt under conventional structures to sukuk. When we structure the debt with sukuk as a debt-based instrument, we are in fact importing with it the behavior pertinent to the conventional instrument. The finance party or the issuer or originator has obligation to make good the outstanding debt arising from the contract. When you go into a debt contract, you are in fact indebted to the investor on the entire price obligation of the contract. When you go into murabahah, for example, the purchase price, which is the selling price plus the profit element on the contract, there is a debt obligation. You are in fact servicing just like servicing the interest and the profit. I'm not saying you are paying interest here, but I say that the analogy is just like servicing the interest of the profit because it is a debt. So this outstanding debt, as I say, comprises both the principal of the financing as well as the profits to the financing. And the recovery by investors normally involve a long legal process if it is if it is a debt. Because the debt structure, if it is not under the concept of an SPV or SPC, then they become a straight debt bound by the law of contract under the common law. And if it is bound by the common law, under the law of contract, then it needs a court order for recovery. The first and second category of which are asset-based and asset-backed classification is very popular in Malaysia. But today, the asset-backed is more popular because of the recovery process. I mentioned to you the asset-based is more of more likened to the debt-based structure of a straight murabahah, or tawaruk structure. The third category is generic sukuk. So under this generic, the creativity arises because in order to avoid the element of a sale of a debt within the component of the sukuk, they say, why don't we mix the sukuk structure to comprise of a debt under murabahah or istisna with an ijara, because ijara is actually the rental asset. So when you mix that, then the weight of the ijara asset within it does not classify the sukuk as a debt. So these assets which are blended within the sukuk cause the sukuk to be known as hybrid or mixed asset sukuk. But I tell you the idiosyncrasies of what happened later on. because sometimes people trying to be very, what they call it, pious, but they forgot the fact that the market works in a very different way. Under the asset-backed structure, the income and capital guarantee are incorporated into the structure itself. These are similar to features of conventional bond. Just like a bond has got the element of interest and profit and principal and security, so the asset-based structured Sukuk has also got the component of profits and the principal and also the security to the Sukuk. It can be in the form of assets, it can be in the form of a guarantee, or it can be in the form of other financial instruments. The incorporation of income and capital guarantee ensure that a single failure to make a periodic payment on time or to redeem the capital or to redeem the principal amount on the due date would constitute default. Now, this is very interesting because the word to make a periodic payment on time has been much debated lately under the pandemic. What do you call that period that we have gone through, because of the structures of accounting that we adopt in Malaysia, particularly the IFRS standards, which is very stringent on the commitments by the obligor on periodic payment, and the inability to make these payments during the pandemic has would lead to huge losses by the banks. So the discussion of moratorium arises, and discussion of moratorium and discussion of structuring the recovery of certain payment losses is it has been much debated, and I would advise all of you to go and look into this subject, understand how it arises, and understand the weaknesses of the accounting system, particularly in relation to Islamic finance. Whether Islamic finance need a separate accounting system, or whether Islamic finance need a more defined structure of payment under the concept of settlement. So the recourses on default is the issue that I mentioned. The recourses to the obligor or the issuer will be subject to claims under the course of law and are often very time-consuming, and thus subjecting investors to opportunity loss while waiting for recovery. So the reason why I am bringing this into the fact is that a lot of people who are involved in structuring Sukuk, whether in a financial market institution, or whether they, or in fact, lectures of Sukuk in a few institutions I've seen, never talk about the recovery processes of Sukuk in detail. They never talk about the concept of IBRA and and other penalties to Sukuk, and also the processes of recovery. And this is very pertinent, to Sukuk itself. So when you structure Sukuk, you must be sure that you structure or you tighten the various aspect of Sukuk, not just on financing, not just on the concept of Sharia, but also on the other aspect of of security pertinent to the financing itself. Not only the Ijarah, but also participatory Sukuk, such as Musyarakah or the structure as asset-based, all replicate that instrument. I say that Ijarah replicate that instrument because under a straight Ijarah that we have, where we sell the beneficial rights of the Sukuk, the investors do not have ownership on the Ijarah asset, just the beneficial rights. When they have beneficial rights to the asset, they have no right to dispose of the asset upon default. So it is just like another debt instrument. So this is one area which is quite lengthy to discuss. It's quite interesting. I would advise all of you, in fact, to do more research on this subject, because we have seen a lot of case studies and discussion on Sukuk, but I have not seen anyone that discuss on the strength of structures of Sukuk, as well as the recovery mechanism of Sukuk in other cases of default. Under the asset-backed structure, which is quite different because these are structured under the structure of SPVs or special purpose vehicles, where the investors are granted ownership in the tangible asset or business venture. In this case, the asset which is tangible must be owned by the SPV, and the SPV are then owned by the investors through the trustees. This is another space which is not understood also by many of the industry players on the role of the trustees. They assume that since the trustee role is going to be outsourced to the trustee, but they forgot the fact on what actually the role of the trustees are in making the scoop possible. Inshallah, if I have time, I will talk to that in a lengthier way. But basically, under asset-based structure, you have got SPVs, and the investors has got the beneficial right. They have got the right, legal right to the assets. Under the asset-backed structure, the sale of the asset is a true sale application. This is another terminology which I hope you have not forgotten. What is a true sale? A true sale is where the sale of the asset is with the legal rights to sale. In the GCC under the IOFI structure, the sale of beneficial right is not a true sale. Whereas in Malaysia, we consider that as not as a sale, although not a true sale, but we consider the sale of beneficial right as a sale of right that would eligible it to be structured for the case of Sukuk. So under the SPV, the sale must be a true sale, whereby the legal title of the asset must be transferred to the SPV, and then the investors through the trustee are the owners of those rights. So a true sale implies the asset of the issuer will not be added to the assets of the originator. It means that if the issuer, let's say ABC company, which has got an IPP contract with Naga National, decide to go into a Sukuk program to construct the power plant. The power plant is not the ownership of ABC, but the ownership of the SPV, which is then which legally belongs to the investors. So under the foreclosure condition, if the company ABC is being foreclosed, the foreclosing parties has no right to claw upon the asset of the power plant, because this has already been carved into the asset of the SPV. So the Sukuk holders must assume any losses in case of impairment of value from the disposal of Sukuk asset. If the sale of the asset causes losses, then the Sukuk holders has got recourse to the issuer. There is always embedded with the structure of the legal document. As an example of Sukuk Ijarah structured as an asset base, the lessee will need to issue an order to purchase the underlying asset, but its financing will be from the funds raised through the Sukuk. The purchase mechanism or the purchase process must come from the client, from the lessee, because he knows what is the classification or definition of the asset to be acquired. So he originates the purchase order. Or if the asset is already owned by the lessee, then he must sell it to the SPV. That means the SC will buy the SPV will buy the asset from the lessee and own the asset. So normally such a structure will be embedded with a binding promise or one mulzim from the originator to repurchase the asset. Because at the end of the period, what would the SPV do with the asset? The SPV are only interested in investing in the financing, but not in operating the power plant. So to enable the lessee to finally acquire the asset, there will be this one mulzim for him to repurchase the asset. And this repurchase, in fact, also can also be translated as a redemption of the principal amount. And the sale of the asset will be as I mentioned, under a true sale application. So please bear this terminology in mind, the difference between true sale and the not true sale. And this is a description of the ABS. I'm taking some time to explain this concept because this is quite a misunderstood concept of ABS. In fact, in many of the issues of Sukuk that come across in the country, they sometimes they lose track of what actually they are structuring because they forgot the pertinent aspect of how an ABS should be. In Malaysia, we have got the ABS guidelines 204 issued by the SC, where it clearly states that any transfer of assets to an SPV in the transaction must comply with the criteria of a true sale. This is the what we call it, the wajib aspect. The SPV then issues the asset-backed sukuk to the investors. Upon buying the asset, SPV issue the asset-backed sukuk to the investors. Then the sale of the asset-backed sukuk to the investors will then raise the fund necessary to pay for the purchase of the asset or necessary to continue with the project. And the investors in subscribing to the asset-backed sukuk includes the proceeds of the issuance that will be used to pay the originator if it is a sale leaseback in return for the sale of the asset. An asset-backed sukuk provides sukuk holders with an undivided, proportionate beneficial right or interest in the asset, thus permitting them to receive a stream of cash flow attached to the asset. Now, please remember this aspect. This is a legal definition of your rights as investors to the asset in the sukuk under the SPV structure. There is an example here, which what called a quite simple example of what SPV what we call it, structure would be. The sukuk are structured under the SPV, where the company issues the sukuk rather than a special purpose vehicle. Sorry, this is an example of asset-backed sukuk. Asset-backed sukuk is the opposite of asset. I think I made a mistake here. I'm sorry. This actually is asset-based sukuk. Asset-based sukuk, not asset-backed. Asset-based sukuk, where the company issues the what they call that issues the sukuk directly to the investors, and it is not the SPV that owns the sukuk, but it is the company that owns the asset. The company that issues the sukuk that owns the asset. So the trustee or facility agent then leases the asset back to the company under the Ijarah agreement. But under the SPV structure, you have got here where the originator would sell under one day, would enter into an Ijarah agreement between the originator and the SPV. You can see the SPV was formed first, and then it needed what they call that for the agreement, the Ijarah agreement between the investor and the between the SPV and the originator. The SPV then issues sukuk to the investors too. And then under the tree, under the under the third leg there, the sukuk are sold to the primary investors, and then the primary investors will then make their proceeds payment to the SPV, and this proceed payment are then paid to the to the vendor of the asset in order to enable the the procurement of the asset, which is the power plant. So in the procurement, there will be the process of buying the hard asset, also the process of constructing it. So this is then coordinated by the obligo on behalf of the SPV. This is normally the structure of how the the ownership structure of an asset bank would take place. Then the second leg is always the rental process and revenue generation, where the SPV under the fifth leg there will receive rental payment from the lessee to the lessor. The lessor here is the SPV. The lessee is the originator, who pay regularly, and under sixth, the SPV will then pay the sukuk holders or the investors regular payment. And upon upon the finality of the transaction, then there is the final settlement under wa'ad mulzim, or payment for the purchase of the lease asset. But it got done by the lessee to the SPV. That means the lessee will now buy the asset from the SPV, and the asset will then be transferred to the obligo or to the originator. That means the transfer of legal title of lease asset to the lessee or the issuer, and that will until the final cancellation of the sukuk itself. So this would be a good story where the obligations are paid duly on time, and then the retirement process takes place as per plan. Differences between the asset-backed and asset-based. Asset-based and asset-backed is that in the first category, which is asset-based, the underlying asset used to structure the issuance remains on the balance sheet of the originator. Okay, see, the asset always belongs to the originator on the asset-based. That means the originator can then take benefit of the, for example, of the depreciation and other claims on the asset. In this category, the originator only passes beneficial ownership of the asset to the sukuk holder, while safekeeping its legal ownership. It means that what right that is given to the sukuk holders are just the beneficial ownership, whereas the legal ownership rests with the continue to rest with the originator. In other words, from the legal perspective, there is no true sale in the asset-based structure, since the sukuk holders do not have any concern in the underlying asset. Therefore, the sukuk holders cannot sell the asset to a third party. It also means the sukuk holders only have recourse to the originator or obligo from time to time. This is what we call the main the difference between asset-based and asset-backed. Under the concept of asset-backed, there is the issue of what we call that warranty on the asset that would arise, because the warranty is only good for the user. So there is the need for the warranty, what we call that recognition, to be recognized or to be issued by the vendor of the instrument, not to the sukuk holders or not to the SPV, but then redirected to the lessee or originator, because from time to time it is the lessee or originator that would take care of the maintenance of the sukuk. Now, when I talk about maintenance of the sukuk asset, of the ijarah asset, then there arises an issue of which is much debated, as who maintains the ijarah asset. Is it the lessee or is it the owner? Now, the Sharia dictates says that the owner must maintain the asset because they have ownership. Then the issue of warranty then arises. If the owner has got the right of what they call it, has got the obligation of maintenance, then how come I don't have the right of warranty? This case, in fact, it has not been resolved. It is still much debated, and for the time being, it is assumed that the right of maintenance rise with the owner of the asset, which is the SPV, but then the obligation is carried out by the lessee or the obligo on behalf of the owner, and there will be certain set off at the end of the period as to what has been expended on this matter. This is still an open debate, and for that matter, the IFRS has not really given any proper statement on this yet. In the case of hybrid sukuk, it means that in a structure, the holder would have the right to convert sukuk certificates into shares or equity ownership from the issuer, following the conversion of the sukuk. The holder can convert the certificates into shares or equity ownership if they convert the sukuk. While under the under the asset-based structure, the applied contract can only be one Sharia contract, is murabahah, ijarah, and so on. That means a hybrid can comprise both physical asset, tangible, and Sharia compliant receivable. This is the difference between hybrid and the other two types of sukuk. The hybrid consists of physical asset, tangible, and also receivable. Now, receivable is a debate that you cannot sell receivable. That's what IOF is saying, because receivable are dime. And then the asset composition between tradable and non-tradable asset is that the dictate by IOF says that since murabahah and istisna contract cannot be traded or secondary market due to buy and dine restriction, the proportion of intangible in the pool asset cannot exceed 49% of total asset. It means that intangible must be 49% of the total asset within the structure, and 51% must be under the under the asset, the real asset, structure of ijarah. If you have this composition 49-51, then the ruling of IOF say you can trade the sukuk. Now this is the interesting concept. Let me explain further what is meant by the debate on tangible and non-tangible. In the murabahah model, for example, the capital is used to buy commodities and sell it at murabahah cost plus to the issuer. which become a debt upon the issuer just as a conventional bond. It becomes a debt. It's not a loan, but it becomes a debt. It's a financial, what they call obligation. The issuer then sells the commodity for cash. In applying fiqh al-ma'al, that means consideration for the ends and consequences, this sukuk ultimately represent a debt instrument that resembles a conventional debt security, not to mention the installment payment or coupon, may be tied to some benchmark rate. This is what I call that as one of the research papers by Rodney Wilson in 2008. And IOFI has, as a result, banned the secondary market trading on sukuk structures based on what I call on the debt obligation. The case of Salam Sukuk is similar since they represent a debt for the sukuk holders, in that the Muslim fiqh or commodity to be delivered is an entitlement of the sukuk holders, which would later be sold at the sukuk, upon sukuk maturity for them to redeem the shares. Salam contracts were traditionally permitted for purposes of dire necessity, for which the farmer had no alternative for crop production except through initial funding to cultivate the land. This is normal practice for Salam, where the farmers take cash up front and then at the end of the harvest would then deliver the product of the harvest. This concession has been expanded beyond these parameters and used as a basis for that instrument for things such as monetary policy. So this is what is interesting. What is interesting is that the Salam papers has been used, what we call that, as that instrument in some countries, where they use the Salam papers as what I call that treasury papers. The same thing goes for istisna. These are also debt certificates, which the product to be what I call it to be financed under debt obligation. So istisna is much less contentious as a structure since project developers need initial funding to construct. Just in the classical juristic period, the istisna debt payment is accepted only due to such a need. So these are the difference between the first of commodity, what I call it, sale murabaha, salam, and istisna. There is a quite interesting research under the link here. Now let's look at the what I call it structure mechanism. We don't have much time actually, because there will be some space for Q&A. Let me just go on the what I call it on marketability of the sukuk. In order to enable marketability tradability of sukuk in the secondary market in accordance with Sharia principle, sukuk must represent interest in a physical asset rather than simply representing debt obligation. Some Sharia scholars have been comfortable with physical assets underlying sukuk structures, representing at least 33% of the sukuk's face value. Other Sharia scholars require between 51 and 70 of the assets underlying sukuk structures to be physical assets. Now, this is what is happening in the market today. Although the initial dictate says that the physical asset must be in the majority, and then the intangible must be in the minority. But what happened today is that the intangible has been increased to majority, and tangible has been has been reduced to a minority, 33%. This is what is happening under general structure. And then when it is debated and asked and questioned, they say that, brother, suluth kathir, a third is more than enough. We can see what we see in Malaysia is that we are laughing here in Malaysia because we can see that most of the time they should put what the Sharia scholar does not see the difficulties in transaction, the reality of what is happening in the market. The problem of ensuring that Sharia compliant is to the best of its requirement is not an easy thing. Even I question the concept of in the case of generic sukuk. I question one of the Sharia scholar of ISDB when they do this. How do you transfer the intangible to the special purpose vehicle? And they couldn't answer the question. I say, brother, accountants are accountants. When they transfer, it is transferred still at a discount, which is by a dime. There's no way that they can transfer the istismar or the murabah component to the SPV at the face value of the contract. It would always be transferred at the real time value of money, which is at a discount. So in fact, the buy-and-dine has entered the component of the structure for the first day itself. So the debate on whether a generic sukuk is in conformity to the restriction of buy-and-dine or not is actually a question to a lot of us here. So this is the thing that you can see the reason why today there is lesser generic sukuk in the marketplace. Then we have got the regional differences. The Sharia compliant financing structures adopted in the Middle East can differ considerably from those in Asia. I say Asia because we got Malaysia, we got Indonesia, we got what do you call that, Labuan for that matter to some extent. And there are quite some differences, but of course in Labuan, sukuk are structured according to order. Whatever the customer wants, they can order, they can structure it. If you want an IFE structure, I'll give an IFE structure. If you want a Malaysian structure, they give Malaysian structure. So many reasons account for this distinction, including the differences in the interpretation of the Sharia between Middle Eastern and Asian scholars. Now, these are the things which is very obvious, what I call that, very true. But actually, there are quite a lot of market difficulties which we have not been able to achieve, not be able to resolve in discussing the Sharia aspect of structures, what I call that, of the sukuk issuances. And there's of course rating requirement for sukuk, which is what I call it is not known. But today under the SC criteria, it is not mandatory for sukuk to be rated anymore. I will not go through the process of what is rating and how it's rated. This is quite a simple process. Even though it is not mandatory, but investors by statutes, for example, the EPF, will not buy any sukuk which is not rated below what you call that, which is not rated AA or above. That is the statute of EPF or KWAP or even Tamu Haji. So what then would happen? So this has driven a lot of issuers to go for a voluntary rating of the sukuk. It will cost more. Or if they do go for voluntary rating of the sukuk, then the issuer is being rated. That means there is a corporate rating of the issuer. But corporate rating has got its problem as well. In the global financial crisis, if you remember, the toxic assets, which was not rated because of the complexity of the structures. It was not rated by the rating agencies. They say we couldn't understand the structure because of many layering of transactions within it. So to make it better, let's rate the issuer. So they rate, who do they rate? They went to rate Lehman Brothers. And Lehman Brothers got a triple rating. So people went to buy into Lehman Brothers assets, Lehman Brothers bonds. And what happened to it? The toxic assets crumbled all the bonds and Lehman Brothers collapsed. So the danger of what you call it, corporate rating as against sukuk rating or against what you call the bond rating is very apparent. So it is very important that in the rating process, the rating company understands very, very clearly the structure of how a sukuk has been issued. And alhamdulillah, in Malaysia, I would say that rating companies such as Mark and RAM, they are not just what they call it very proficient in the structure of sukuk, but they also do program on sukuk, what they call that on sukuk itself. They wrote quite a number of books on sukuk and what they call that on the risk element as well as secondary trading aspect of the sukuk. So this is the aspect of rating, what they call it for sukuk. I think we'll end at this point because what they call it. The rating process is not what they call that a very tricky issue to many, since what they call that the rating companies are very transparent. There are quite a number of articles on sukuk. I would like to what they call invite the floor for question and answers for any challenges in what I say. If what I say is not right, please correct me, and then. I open the floor now, please. Thank you. Open the chat.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Wan Abdurrahim Kamil, for all your sharing and knowledge, your experience. We hope everyone has benefited from this talk. All joiners, we welcome your feedback for the improvement of our Baseerah Talk Series. For all of you who joined via Zoom meeting, kindly refer to our chat box. There is a link to our evaluation form shared. As for viewers via YouTube Live, kindly click the link provided at the chat box of our YouTube Live and fill out the evaluation form. We appreciate all of your feedbacks. And after this, we will open the floor to question and answer. For Zoom participants, please get ready. If you have any question, you may unmute your mic and ask directly to our speaker. As for joiners via YouTube, you may drop your questions at the chat box and we will read it during the session. So now let's watch some videos by IIUM Academy while waiting for the Q&A session. All right, we are now, we have reached to the question and answer session. I will first open the floor to participants via Zoom. If you have any question, you may unmute your mic and then state your name and direct your question to our speaker.
Assalamualaikum. Ahmad Nazir Chin sini. Apa khabar Cik Wan?
Alhamdulillah, thank you.
Minta maaf lah nak bertanya ni, kita nak orang lama ada pencen apa kita. Cuma yang bugging me until now is about ijarah punya apa maintenance of the asset. You have answered it just now. Dia kata currently the lessor pass the obligation to maintain asset to the lessee. Macam ITAP pun we've been doing that through some form of document. Sukuk I believe about the same. Cuma the issue now, I mean, the student keep on asking how long contohnya this going to happen, because this is more like a treatment for conventional. What do you think if we are going into 100% Islamic finance platform, can this issue be resolved? Means to say, lessor kena tanggungjawab. You lease the asset, you must be responsible of the maintenance. Minta your view, Cik Wan.
Thank you, Brian. In fact, this issue is much debated. But it's a question, it's an issue of dollars and cents. If the lessor is to maintain, there will be added cost to the what they call it, to the financing overall financing. But the wisdom of maintaining the asset is always with the lessee, the user. They know how to use, how to maintain it. So that's why for the time being, what has been discussed and agreed is that the lessee maintain it on behalf of the lessor, and then later on claim the amount that has been expended, what do you call it, through certain maybe we call it monetary claim or through discount or whatever processes. Let's say if you realize today that there has been quite a few of ijarah transaction in the market until this is resolved fully. Then even question of warranty, the buyer of the asset gets the warranty from the vendor. There can be many asset and vendors to a certain what they call it fund. So if the warranty is given to the lessor, what do I do with the warranty? Because the lessee is the user of the asset. Unless there are certain processes within the warranty that say that I have the right to transfer this warranty to other parties, which I hope it is in place. But there are quite a number of legal issues actually on this matter, which need more discussion. That's why in the case of Sukuk structuring, I reminded just now that we are busy in structuring only the financial aspect, but we forgot the other aspect pertinent to the various stakeholders in the Sukuk exercise. So it is time for us to really discuss openly, not just on the efficiency of structures, but also on the legal foreclosures, the processes of legal foreclosures in this process. An example that I always quote, not legal, not ijarah, that is called the An-Nakhil Sukuk. Back in 1998, if I am not mistaken, during the global financial crisis in Dubai, An-Nakhil is a development sukuk by a GLC, An-Nakhil. And then the sukuk was so big, involved what they call a lot of investor parties from outside Dubai. So the trust deed was done in accordance with the law of Guernsey. The sukuk structure was under the governing law of UK. Then the security was under the governing law of Dubai. And then the sukuk was under the law of the DIFC and a few others. And there was a foreclosure. So the UK courts there decided that the foreclosure, that there is a default on the part of the client. So then the sukuk the client has got to be foreclosed on. So they came happy. Investors were happy. They went to Dubai to foreclose, and they were told, "I'm sorry, brother, the lands are under the law of Dubai, and under the law of Dubai, foreigners cannot own land. What do we do now?" So he was like, he would cry on this. He would cry until the end that for goodwill purposes, the government of Dubai decided to redeem entire sukuk and pay off the investors. Tapi the point that I'm saying here is that there is very lack of due diligence by us in the industry on the on the pertaining impact of the various issues in Sukuk, whether it is a national land code, whether it's the common law aspect, the Sharia court arbitration, or whether it is the the contract of sale, and many other things on this. And I hope that all of you young people that you are please go and discuss this thoroughly and take the KFH Ijara case as an example. In the case of KFH, there was actually a debate on ownership, on who is the owner of the asset, who maintains the asset. That's quite an interesting case. Luckily, there was a majority for KFH on the case, but this is just a majority, not a consensus. A consensus would mean a reality of the surety of the whole thing. A majority means understanding is there. So this is quite a very sensitive issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will open one more question for our Zoom participant, if there is any. Okay, if there's none, I will proceed to questions asked via YouTube Live. This is from Associate Professor Dr. Omaima El Tahir. The question is, any statistics on the usage of asset based over asset-backed structures?
Well, in fact, there were annual statistics on the structures compiled with the SC on this matter, but it was never aggregated in for academic purposes. But if you need this, I would advise that you get some research student to do the compilation. It's quite interesting because not just on the structure of ABS, generic or asset based, but also the structure of the use of forms of the contract between tawarru, wakala, and also the combination of between wakala, tawarru, and ijara, or wherever it is. This is quite interesting because, as I mentioned in the lecture just now, there has been lack of research on the effectiveness or efficiency of forms of structures. So I hope, Prof, that you can take initiative to do this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wan. Second question comes from Muhammad Shukran. Is there any specific mechanism to determine the sukuk return? How does the return being informed or disclosed to the sukuk holders?
I would like to know where the Muhammad Shukran is from. Actually, it's quite interesting. Maybe a student. See, in any, I would like to remind all the interested parties in sukuk to also read the PTCs or the principal term and condition. There is now on the BIX or bond exchange of the SC, whereby all sukuk issues, the term and condition to these issues are displayed and made public. This is something actually which even among the students of universities, which they fail to appreciate. By understanding the PTCs, they will know not just the Sharia structure of the sukuk, but also on the security aspect, the legal condition, as well as the return that is been affixed to the issues, and also the foreclosure mechanism or the the clauses on default. These are very rich document, which has not been much explored by many people in the industry, even people in the banking industry who does sukuk. I always remind them that after you have done a sukuk, please go and read the PTC of other issues as well and understand. Inshallah, if the academy would permit me time, I will bring you all the case studies of various sukuk based on the PTC, and also the understanding journey on how to understand the PTCs. Within the PTCs today, also the Sharia, Sharia endorsements, how the Sharia has reviewed the sukuk structures, and then how the parameters of, for example, sustainable and green sukuk are being formed, which are very interesting. So coming back to the return on Sukuk, you can see within the PTC, the investors are always informed beforehand on what are the return that could be expected from the Sukuk. Of course, I think the next question that you will ask, if you have done, is how are the return determined? Then the debate will go on, oh, the returns are again based on interest. So we have not been able to answer what they call that intelligently on this, rather than we say that, oh, it is benchmark to interest. It is not interest, but benchmark to interest. Of course, this is just a temporary measure. We hope that one day, inshallah, we can find a solution to what they call that to measuring return to Sukuk. This is our call. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Next question comes from Muhammad Ishram. May I know what is Encik Wan's thought on the recent implementation of Standard 59?
I'm not sure what is that the IFRS? I'm not able to answer the question, sorry.
All right, then we'll proceed to the next question. Again from Muhammad Shukran. If Islamic banks become one of the subscribers, does the Sharia officer of the banks should stand guided by the Sharia pronouncement of the Sukuk program, or can advise other aspects?
Very interesting question. There is a senior officer present today, Muhammad Musaddiq. I wish he can explain on that. Muhammad Musaddiq is a Sharia officer from one of the banks. See, when a bank invests in a Sukuk, the bank will invest as an investor in the Sukuk. As an investor, the bank would have to abide by the Sharia resolution of the Sukuk issuer. And Sukuk in Malaysia are approved by the SC. That means the SC would have undergone the process of Sharia scrutiny, not just what they call it, looking at the papers, but the SC would also call the Sharia advisor or the Sharia team of the advisor acting on behalf of the issuer to come and explain in detail the structure. If it is a new structure, especially, there will be much discussion on this. And believe me, I was from the SC, and I would say that in most of the Sukuk structures that we have today are always or have always been debated quite extensively by the Sharia Council of the SC. And they have been, in fact, what do you call that, recommended changes to the structure as well. So what has been delivered to the market under the information memorandum are a very, what do you call it, robust decision after our decision taken after robust discussion on this. And the market as well as the investor are, what do you call it, are called upon to accept this decision without any other changes to it. This is the what do you call the practice in the market.
All right, thank you very much to Mr. Wan and everybody who has asked questions. We have now come to the end of our program today. On behalf of IIUM Academy, I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude and appreciation to Mr. Wan Abdurrahim Kamil for all his sharing. And our gratitude also goes to our joiners for your commitment and also participation. We apologize for any shortcoming in handling this program. Inshallah, we'll meet again in the next Baseerah Talk Series session next month. So stay tuned with us as we will announce another renowned speaker in April. You may follow us now, log on to your Instagram and look for IIUM Academy, and Facebook IIUM Academy of Graduate and Professional Studies. We look forward to seeing you again. Together we seek knowledge and improve our understanding. We'll now end the session with the recitation of Tasbih Kafarah and Surah Al-As. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.